Hey guys, this is the last video of the first meditation, and then we have to get into reading the second meditation, which will be just as fun. This time we're going to look at why Descartes suggests that an evil demon is deceiving us rather than God. And to do that, we need to do three things. We need to recap on the previous argument. Then we need to consider what will happen when we try to reconcile traditional notions of what is the nature of God, pretty much referring to year 11 content. And then we need to reconcile this kind of argument that's provided in the previous section with those traditional notions of God. And then after that, we're going to look at why he introduced the idea of the evil deceiver. So write these three success criteria down, then score yourself on them. And once you've done that, pretty pleased with the cherry on top, draw an APK of an evil magician or an evil deceiver trying to convince you that the world is something that it's not. Okay, so how does this section start off? Well, it's pretty simple. Basically, let's just go ahead and have a look at the simplicity of the argument, okay? God is not only all-powerful, but God is also supposed to be omnibenevolent. He's all-kind. He's a good guy, right? So therefore, he can't really be this malicious magician who's trying to lie to us and deceive us, because lying and deception kind of implies a bit of a negativity. It's not really a positive term, is it? So he can't really be the person who is lying to us. So the person that is deceiving us and tricking us in general must be some kind of demonic evil genius that's able to deceive us and has the power to do so. And like, for instance, convincing us that there's a hole in our hand and a huge pen when obviously there isn't. So this demonic evil genius is the one that performs the deceptions, and we then logically conclude that, so if we are surrounded and all encompassed by this deception, by the evil genius, then everything that we see, perceive, all the ideas of logic, everything that's a priori, must be some kind of illusion. So why should we bother with our inquiry? Take a note. So what we should remember is that we've just talked about the idea that God has the power, because he's omnipotent, omnipotent, to create that deception and create a false version of reality that's presented to us, not just in terms of our sense data, but of course in a priori logic as well. Moving from that, then we need to have a look at, well, okay, but God is omnibenevolent. How do we reconcile them? And we've already mentioned how he did that. He introduced the idea of a malicious evil deceiver. This first paragraph of the reading is a bit confusing. It's kind of crazy. I mean, he's just talked about the pointlessness of atheism, because if he does that, he'll just never find certainty. He needs a God in order to help him understand certainty, to say something is definitely there. I don't know if I agree with that argument, but that's what he said, and I think that he just talks a bit more about his methodology in the first paragraph, but the really important stuff is in the second paragraph, okay? Let's go. But it is not enough merely to have noticed this. I must make an effort to remember it. My habitual opinions keep coming back, and despite my wishes, they capture my belief, which is, as it were, bound over to them as a result of long occupation of the law of custom. Put it simply, what he's saying here is just due to habit. He tends to think that his old opinions and understandings about the way the world works are true. He keeps falling back into that habit. I shall never get out of the habit of confidently assenting to these opinions, so long as I suppose them to be what they in fact are, namely highly probable opinions. Highly probable opinions. Opinions which, despite the fact that they are, in a sense, doubtful, as have been shown, it is still much more reasonable to believe than to deny. Okay, so some things he's saying are much more reasonable to believe than to deny. Not all of them. Maybe this is the God argument still. In view of this, I think it would be a good plan to turn my will completely to the opposite direction and deceive myself by pretending for a time that these former opinions are utterly false and imaginary. So he's saying, even if there is a high probability that my opinions are true, which could be God, then what I need to do is, because there's a degree of uncertainty built into them, I'm going to completely deceive myself as well and say it's all bad, it's all untrue. I need to find that one certainty, so I need to assume that the thing that might have a high probability of being true but isn't 100% true is not true. Okay, take a note. I shall do this until the weight of preconceived opinion is counterbalanced and the distorting influence of habit, which is what I've assumed to be true in the past, is no longer prevents my judgment from perceiving things correctly. In the meantime, I know that no danger or error will result from my plan, and that I cannot possibly go too far in my distrustful attitude. This is because the task now in hand does not involve action, but merely the acquisition of knowledge. So, I'm going to go ahead and doubt things which I think might have a high probability of truth because they still have a lack of certainty built into them, and I'm going to go for that one thing that I must be certain with. So, I will suppose, therefore, that not God, who is supremely good and the source of truth, but rather some malicious demon of the utmost power and cunning has employed all his energies in order to deceive me. So there we go. It can't be God because God is good, so there's this malicious demon doing the deception. Take a note. I shall think that the sky, the air, the earth, colours, shapes, sounds, and all external things are merely delusions or of dreams which he has devised to ensnare my judgment. I shall consider myself as not having hands or eyes or flesh or blood or senses, but as falsely believing that I have all these things. I shall stubbornly and firmly persist in this meditation, and even if it is not in my power to know any truth, I shall at least do what is in my power, that is, resolutely guard against something to any falsehoods that the deceiver, however powerful and cunning he may be, will be unable to impose on me in the slightest degree. So what he's basically said in a really roundabout way is I've got to find that thing that the evil deceiver won't be able to impose on me. Because if I find that, then I will be at a closer point of certainty. Take a note. In this arduous, which means long, boring, in this arduous undertaking, and kind of laziness brings me back to normal life. But this is an arduous undertaking, and kind of laziness brings me back to normal life. I'm like a prisoner who is enjoying an imaginary freedom while asleep. As he begins to suspect that he is asleep, he dreads being woken up and goes along with the pleasant illusion as long as he can. In the same way, I happily slide back into my old opinions and dread being shaken out of them, for fear that my peaceful sleep may be followed by hard labour when I wake, and that I shall have to toil, not in the light, but amid the inextricable darkness of the problems I have now raised. He's basically saying, I'm looking for that one certain thing. I'm going to doubt anything that can be doubted, even if it might be highly probable. But I don't really want to live like that at the moment because it's too much work. I'm going to put that work away, and I'm going to go back to my old habit of opinions and take a break for a while. The end of the first meditation. Okay? Take some notes. So I think we should be able to say that the previous argument, if God was basically, if God has the power to manipulate us even at the level of logic and a priori, then God could be a deceiver, and we need to assume that that could happen. But this isn't in the nature of God, so it must be something else, which is that malicious demon. And that's why the evil deceiver, the evil genius deceiver, is probably the one that is doing it, because it contradicts the nature of God, who is the source of all truth, to deceive us. Now, I don't know about you, but I think we're starting to see some contradictions in the arguments. Like, shouldn't we be doubting God as the source of truth if we can doubt that? But then again, you're dealing with a very Christian philosophy here, and someone who's not really able to conceive of God as anything else but the wellspring of truth. So that's why that conclusion's been made. Right, so you're probably going to hate me for this, but I'm going to tell you now, this first meditation is probably the easiest reading. It really gets complex when we get into the second reading, because that's where we get really, really, really philosophical. And you need to be very mindful of that, because the concepts get way, way more complex. Keep that in mind. I hope you've done all your notes on this section, because this is really like an introductory section to what the cogito is, what the thinking thing is, and how the perception of mind works, and how understanding works. Okay? Thank you very much for listening.